I do have some questions that persons have sent me on Messenger, which have been kind of accumulating. And we could discuss that, unless anyone present has, if anyone present has anything that they wanted to address today, then we can go into that, I think. Okay. Well, the persons they're not actually here right now. They'll remain anonymous, but I'll send them the link to the video so I can say I've answered the question. Okay, so the first one, someone was asking me, they say they go on book collection, book distribution. And but they have a problem because they said, this is a lady, and she said that the men she approaches, they always they go in another direction, let's say. And so, I mean, the only advice, and so she was asking for advice on how to deal with that. And I would say, just, try to stick to the point, I don't think there should be too much room for other things to discuss. You're bringing a Bhagavad Gita, you can keep it short, keep it succinct, focused. And if they're not interested in the book, then you can just move on. That's what I would say. And if that doesn't work, then just approach ladies, don't approach men. I don't know if I have much more to say about that. But wish you all the best. And wonderful that you're doing book distribution. It's really a service that I deeply admire. I've done it a few times, and I'm very shy actually about, approaching people in the street, So I always admire devotees like Divi Shakti and Bimala, they're just very natural, Braja Mohini Didi here, they're very comfortable in that department. So I really admire that. Okay. And let me see, I have another list of questions here from somebody else. Now, one of them was about Chaturmasya. And it's relevant because we're actually in the period of Chaturmasya now. And someone was asking about they didn't understand. I think they observed they're from another mission, and they were observing that in our mission, we're not super strict about the Chaturmasya rules, they're meant to be, there are particular foods. I mean, of course, it's not limited to that, but what we hear of most is there are particular foods you're meant to avoid, like yogurt in 1 month and spinach in another month. I'm not very in the term because of the light here. There are particular foods we're meant to abstain from during each of these 4. Literally, Chaturmasya means 4 months. So in these 4 months, each month, there are particular regulations. And so this devotee observed that in our mission, we're not so strict in observing those things. And they mentioned how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was quite strict in observing these things. Okay, so I will enter into some discussion about that. And first thing to understand, that this Chaturmasya, this 4-month observance, it's actually what we've heard from Srila Sridhar Maharaj is that it's something that was focused on more upon sannyasis, because sannyasis, they traditionally, they're not supposed to stay in one place for a long time. They're supposed, because that tends to breed attachments and desire and so on and so forth. So sannyasis were generally expected to be on the move all the time in Vedic India. And we can also add that the society, the Vedic society, was very much supporting that. There's so much importance given to honoring, sadhus, sannyasis, so there's a lot of support. There was a lot of support within the society, the culture, for that lifestyle. And it was helpful for their own, spiritual maintenance and progress. So they weren't expected to stay in one place for a long time. However, during the rainy season, which was tended to be during this 4-month period, like more or less end of July, August, September, October, like around that time, that tended to be the monsoon period. And so it was more difficult to travel during that time. And so there was this allowance given that they could stay in one place. But there were these stipulations that they had to follow, stricter eating habits, amongst other things. I'm not familiar with all of the customs and regulations surrounding Chaturmasya, but there were stricter, let's say, austerities that they were supposed to observe. There's something else I've heard connected with Chaturmasya. Maybe someone else here can explain better, like Suvasini Didi's with us. Maybe she can explain that it's supposed to be a time when Lord Vishnu is resting or something like that. So you're not meant to disturb him, or some idea like that. But in any case, the main point here is that this was not something for everybody to follow. It was some particular thing that sannyasis were expected to observe. And so in our own mission, we followed some, what I saw in Navadvip at least, is that, Gurudev would follow some level of observance, some token observance. I think generally, we would have, in the cooking, they would avoid those foods which are recommended to avoid in the appropriate months. But I also heard Gurudev mention something like if you just follow at least for the first few days, that's okay, like a token thing. I saw that during Kartik, that because Kartik is the month amongst these 4 months of Chaturmasya, Kartik is the month that we do give special attention to. And that's because of the significance of the connection with Srimati Radharani. So it's in a different category for us. We do give attention there. But still, we didn't observe all the austerities, So for example, in the Mat in Navadvip, the first 3 days, we would have a very simple breakfast, simple prasadam. But the rest of the month, that wouldn't be done, And I remember also the first 3 days, we would go out on Sankirtan in the early morning in the town around the Mat. And then throughout the rest of the month, there would be that mood and that encouragement to try to stay focused on devotional activities. But the austerities weren't emphasized, and we would be singing these extra songs in the evenings, in the mornings, and that, that was our observance. Another time there was an occasion when somebody asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and again, somebody from another mission visiting the Mat and observing that in our Mat, the Chaturmasya stipulations weren't being followed very strictly. And they inquired from Srila Sridhar Maharaj, there's a recording of this. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, actually, these are all, superficial things, And he quoted a verse of Prahlad Maharaj, where he mentions, Srila Sridhar Maharaj quoted this phrase in particular, which uses the word swatmarpanam, which means self-giving, And in this verse of Prahlad, I can't remember right now the full verse, but the point he's making, he says that the real purpose of all the Vedas, of all the Vedic instruction, is to bring one to the conception, to the realization of swatmarpanam, which means self-giving. So all of the, like there's a famous verse, perhaps in the Upanishads. What does it go? Vishmartavya Najatu Chit. Suvasniji, you can remember that, right? Vishmartavya. Satatam, no, Smartavyam Satatam Vishnur. Vishmartavya Najatu Chit. Sarva Vidi Nishedasyor Etayor Eva Kinkara. That's it, right? Suvasni Didi, you remember?
No, sorry, Didi, I don't remember by heart. I know that verse, but I don't remember by heart. It looks right, yes.
Okay, yeah, Smartavya Satatam Vishnur begins like that. To always remember Vishnu and to never forget Vishnu. Sarva Vidi Nishedasur. All of the injunctions and the prohibitions given in the scriptures, etayor eva kinkara. Kinkara means servant. So all of the rules and regulations, the injunctions and the prohibitions, they are servants of these two principles, not the other way around. It's not that it's do this and do that is the be all and the end all, but the do this and the do that is to promote Krishna consciousness, God consciousness. So what does that tell you? It means that when appropriate, the do this and the do that can be discarded. They're of secondary importance. No. So what Srila Sridhar Maharaj is saying is all of these rules about Chaturmasya, they are trying to bring persons to the conception of surrender and self-giving. That's the end purpose of them. Not that doing this and doing that is the aim of them. It's not just to follow these things, that's not what it's about. They're supposed to promote higher consciousness. So if you're already cultivating that higher conception, if you've already come to that realization, of full God consciousness, or you're striving for that ideal, you have understood this is the real point of all the teachings, the Vedic teachings, then many of these stipulations, regulations, they will become of less importance because you've understood the point of them. You've come to the conclusion. So that was what Srila Sridhar Maharaj was saying. And then as to why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur emphasized, why, or I can't say he emphasized, I'm not that familiar with his preaching mission, but why did he fall? I have heard that also, like I've heard how, like there's some type of rule, like you're meant to eat off of the floor, like these kind of extreme austerities, like I've heard Srila Saraswati Thakur observing something like that, or at least maybe like on like a leaf plate on the floor, but like not using his hands, like these kinds of things. I've heard how he observed something like that. So why did Saraswati Thakur observe all of these things? We need to look at the context in which he was preaching, Why did Saraswati Thakur include the worship of Shalagram Shila? That's another point. Why did Saraswati Thakur give Brahman initiation? Why was that even necessary? Why did Saraswati Thakur give sannyas? That's also not necessary. That's not a pure Vaishnava practice. There are many things that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did, which are not pure, intrinsic Vaishnava practices. Vaishnavas are higher than Brahmins. So why did Saraswati Thakur give the Brahmin thread? No. And he did that because of the environment in which he was preaching, because of the social environment that he was facing, and that is because he had to demonstrate that Vaishnavas are not less than Brahmins, and that it is not that Vaishnavas are barred from doing, it is not that Vaishnavas cannot do all the things that Brahmins can do. It is not that, anyway, I think what I've said is clear. So another thing so it's like these things are helping people to, like the sannyas, the Brahmin thread, following Chaturmasya, these types of things, they're helping the society at large to understand the dignity of what Krishna consciousness is. It is not lower than all of these things. He was preaching in an environment where there was so much degradation within Mahaprabhu's Sampradaya, and there was so much misunderstanding amongst the general public about who Mahaprabhu's people are. Another point, an interesting point we can touch upon here, is that, and this is something Srila Sridhar Maharaj discussed, how, Rupans, like in the time of Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu also, he considered these things. That's why Mahaprabhu took sannyas. That's why Mahaprabhu not only took sannyas, but very strictly observed all of the rules and expectations, customs of sannyas life. Very strict. He wouldn't hear the name of a woman. Many things he was extremely strict about. So in that time, so Srila Sridhar Maharaj explained, in the time of Mahaprabhu and the time of Rupa and Sanatan, the Mayavadis, the impersonalists, they had a very strong standing. They still do today. And there was a very strong culture of Vairagya, renunciation. There was within the spiritual arena, there was a very strong culture of Vairagya, renunciation. And so for people to take you seriously, you had to show that you could do that. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj made this interesting point, how Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis, they, in their writings, they discussed the principle of Yuktobaidagya. What is Yuktobaidagya? The conception that everything can be used in Krishna's service. Literally it means like something like properly adjusted renunciation, not just dry renunciation, not just renunciation for the sake of renunciation by itself, but renunciation in the interest of Krishna. So means that we are internally, and there's a famous verse, Anasaktasya Vishayan, this is Rupa Goswami, Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatarham Upayunjata Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagyam Uchate. That to be internally detached from everything. So internally, we are not seeing anything with our own selfish interest. But in our engagement with the environment, we're using everything. We're not rejecting anything. We're using everything in Krishna's service. So we see everything in connection with Krishna's service. It's not about renunciation, it's about utilization, proper utilization. So this is Yuktobaidagya. But Srila Sridhar Maharaj made this very interesting point that Rupa and Sanatan, they wrote about this concept, this principle of Yuktobaidagya, and they gave scriptural evidence for it. However, they themselves did not practice it. They lived like under trees, drinking a cup of buttermilk. When Sanat, they didn't use anything of the world. They barely wore any clothes. When there's that famous story of Sanatan Goswami. He had this deity, Madan Mohan deity, that he used to carry with him. And he would make very, very, very simple offerings. And one day, Madan Mohan, we hear, complain to Sanatan, oh, could you please at least just put a little salt? Like, at least put a little salt, something, some flavor, some taste, But actually he was doing that because he was thinking about his devotee. He wanted Sanatan to take something a little nicer, But Sanatan could see through his tricks, and he told him, oh, you're the Supreme Lord. If you want some salt, you can get it for yourself. So that's how extreme they were in their renunciation. So they didn't employ the principle of Yuktobaidagya, and that was because they didn't want it to be seen that they were like making an excuse to do whatever they want. Oh, actually, we can use everything for Krishna's service, and so we're just going to do whatever we want. No, they showed everything can be used for Krishna's service, but they didn't actually live like that themselves. They set the principle down, but they didn't practice it. Then fast forward a few hundred years, Saraswati Thakur comes, and he's seeing in this environment, it's appropriate to employ this. And he had that kind of spiritual power as well to be able to do that. He had that type of spiritual power and authority to be able to implement that principle. And so he did. But at the same time, through other things, he showed, like through his observance of Chaturmasya, he showed we're not afraid of austerity. Yeah, we're using like sometimes we're holding these grand festivals, we're building these beautiful temples, we're using all of this modern technology, which was seen as extravagant and shocking by some people. Going into Vrindavan in a motor car, that was seen as something shocking for the people at the time. So yeah, we're using all of this, matala sarujana vishayarange. We're like madly using everything of this world in the service of Krishna. But don't get the wrong idea. It's not like we're afraid of some austerity, and through these observances like Chaturmasya, he showed that, these strict observances. Shalagram Shila. Why did he worship Shalagram Shila? We're not devotees of Vishnu. We're devotees of Krishna, and we're all, and also it's very difficult to worship Shalagram Shila also, but there are different reasons why we don't follow that worship. So why did Saraswati Thakur observe that? One point that established that in his temples, one point that Srila Sridhar Maharaj made, he made a comment like, in the way that they did the worship, because they would have on Saraswati Thakur's temples, they would have the altars, they would have Radha Krishna Mahaprabhu, and they would also have a Shalagram Shila. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj explained, and through the way of worship, it was demonstrated that Krishna, the worship of Krishna is the central worship, is the highest worship. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj mentioned how he indicated this idea that on the way to Vrindavan there is Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha is on the way to Vrindavan. It's a stop on the way to Vrindavan. And he demonstrated the proper understanding of the relationship, the connection between Vishnu and Krishna. So we have to understand, like, if we're looking at the preaching mission, if we're looking at any preaching mission, we have to understand that sometimes decisions are made in consideration of the public and how we are preaching to the public. Not every decision made necessarily reflects the highest ideals and principles of the core teachings of that mission. Like Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, in his establishment of ISKCON, there are many things that he did which do not represent the highest siddhanta, or even the actual siddhanta at times, like how, for example, but we're saying that with no disrespect. He did that because it's a preaching mission, and that's what you're supposed to do. You're meant to adjust things sometimes in consideration of the persons that you're preaching to. If you're just always talking at the highest level, people aren't going to be able to see how this is relevant. They're not going to be attracted. So like, for example, Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he like giving out Harinam, Japa Mala before initiation. This isn't the proper conception. The proper conception is first you receive the name from a Vaishnava. you must receive the name from a Vaishnava. Then you begin your chanting, your serious chanting, you know. But Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada considered, well, you know, I have to give something to engage people, to attract them, you know, to help them practice, and so he instituted that, you know, and that's still that's continuing today. Another thing that he did is he would have a fire sacrifice accompany Harinam initiation, you know. But actually Harinam is higher than any sacrifice, any fire sacrifice, you know. And so we heard from Sagar Maharaj how, you know, he was initially in ISKCON and he'd seen this custom, and then he came to our mission, hearing from Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he began to understand, have a, you know, develop his understanding, and then he became puzzled on this point. You know, the holy name is higher than any type of fire sacrifice or any other type of ritual or practice. So why should it be necessary for a yagya, fire yagya, to accompany Harinam initiation? You know, so he inquired from Srila Sridhar Maharaj about this. And why did Swami Maharaj Prabhupada do this? And Srila Sridhar Maharaj answered, in a time of famine, distribute food by any means possible. So that was his idea. You know, people love fire sacrifices, you know, they're very impressive. You know, if you have a fire sacrifice, then you feel like, oh, something real really happens, you know. Actually, the whole initiation ceremony is not even necessary. Like that's taken, that we do that, you know, like to mark the occasion, like to mark that something significant has happened. No, but actually it's not required. You know, Gurudev, Saraswati Thakur also, they would give initiation through the phone sometimes. There are some occasions like that. Trivikram Maharaj told me that Srila Gurudev gave initiation to his brother through a telephone call. And then later he told Trivikram Maharaj that the initiation depends on his faith, actually, on his faith. You know, it's a transaction of faith. I'm accepting you as my guru, I'm accepting you as my disciple. You know, that's really the substance of the initiation. So, you know, we have to, if we're looking, as I said, you know, if we're looking at why certain things are done within a preaching mission, we have to consider all of these things, you know. So you know, many of the things that Saraswati Thakur did, most of them probably, you know, we are, you know, that's why, you know, Vaishnava Nugatya, you know, following the Vaishnava is so central, so crucial, you know, because they know when, how, if, how much, you know, they know all of these things, you know, which, what, why, who, when, they know all those things, you know. If we just go and, you know, we see what this person has done, what that person has done, what's written here, what's written there, we'll get totally lost, you know. That's why we follow the Vaishnava, you know. So we're following Srila Govinda Maharaj and Srila Sridhar Maharaj. You know, they're adjusting everything for us and showing us what is proper for us, what is relevant for us at this time, you know. So most of the things probably that Saraswati Thakur instituted, we're following that, we're incorporating that, you know. Generally that's the case, you know. Gurudev even mentioned higher than that, in terms of how we're practicing spiritual Krishna consciousness here and now, we don't look past Saraswati Thakur. Because you could also say, oh, well, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he burned his Brahmin thread. Why don't we all go do that? You know, Rup and Sanatan, they lived under a tree drinking buttermilk. Why don't we all go do that too? You know, if we go and look at how, you know, Gorkishore Das Babaji lived under an upside down boat and would drink water from human skulls. Like, why don't we all go do that? Vamsi Das Babaji would offer a pipe, a tobacco pipe, to his Gaur Nitai deities. You know, why don't we all go do that? You know, if we go and look at like all the different things that great Vaishnavas have done, we can get completely bewildered. we will have no idea, the proper way to practice. So what do? We're taking shelter of the Vaishnava who is before us, who's assessing the situation, what's appropriate for us at this time, here and now, and we're following that with faith, So Srila Govinda Maharaj and so not to disrespect what any other mission is doing, no doubt, any other bona fide authentic mission in the line of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, within that family, there are different decisions made in different groups, and we give our respect to all of them. We don't mean to disrespect anyone. But we're, how Srila Govinda Maharaj and Srila Sridhar Maharaj have laid things out for us, that's how we are following. That's what's appropriate for us. We're happy with that. We don't need anything else, So, yeah, that's my response to that. Does anyone else want to add anything to that? Mm-hmm. Let me see. There were some other things here. Okay, I had another question here, because I said we had a question a month or two ago about God. So someone was asking, like, how can we prove God's existence? And so one of the points that Srila Sridhar Maharaj makes is that no entity can create something that is higher than themselves. So the idea, that everything happened from a big bang of, explosion of chemicals, and, or that, everyone evolved from whatever it is, the, lower life forms, it's not possible, because things move from up to down, It's not possible for something unsophisticated, let's put it like this, to produce something that is sophisticated. For something unrefined to produce something that is refined. So if we look at how like the world, how sophisticated and complex and developed, the human psyche is, the systems of this world, of our bodies, if we look at all this complexity and sophistication, we must come to the conclusion that the source of that is an entity who is of a higher degree of sophistication, complexity, etc. So that was one point we were discussing. And then I had this question: what do you mean when you say men or humans can't produce anything greater than themselves? What about creations as Apple, iPhone, or any of mind-blowing technologies, which we haven't dreamt of ever having? Or is that a creation not really producing? I mean, my simple answer would be that, consciousness is far more sophisticated than all of those things, that, the ways that all this technology works, that's all stemming from, like, how our brains work, and they're not conscious entities, that's just, for me, that's just the end of the discussion. Consciousness is far more complex, sophisticated, and refined than any Apple iPhone.
Didi,
yes,
you can say, can an Apple iPhone love you?
Exactly.
what is higher?
Very nice. Although they are creating these like virtual beings, right? Have you heard of that? Like, you can have relationships with them. Yeah, there's a whole crazy world out there of all this stuff. That's it, AI, right? Artificial intelligence. That's like the new frontier, So that they're there are people exploring that possibility. Yeah. Save
And I just want to add, it's all copies of what originally there is. Like even like if they say your consciousness, how fast your brain, your impulses, all of that, it's, for me, it's like all copies of the original. Even if, they're creating like artificial intelligence, the original is already here. So that's like my view for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Exactly. But to like create another, that hasn't happened yet. Like create another conscious being that has its own independent consciousness and free will. Like that I haven't been able to do that, But anyway, this was the main point, that we cannot create something that is higher than us, that is beyond us. It's not within our capacity. It's not within the capacity of any entity. We can only create something that is inferior to us in some way, So that we see as one proof of the existence of a super consciousness, of a higher conscious being.
On the other hand, also the life is beyond this anyway. The life itself is beyond all this technology.
Yes.
And
yes.
Actually, this question is very burning for me as well, because I had a conversation with my daughter, and I was so helpless to explain to her how can one what's name I cannot find the right word now. What about soul? How one can say that the soul is within the body? What is the evidence of that? Because she is very scientific minded. Her mind is, she trusts only in scientific knowledge. And by faith is not acceptable in this in this world. And I was in one way it is very painful. On the other way, because really you try to do to help somehow to understand, but I feel just helpless.
It's a very difficult thing, because persons who are very empirically minded, they want to be able to perceive that substance through their empiric faculties.
They need evidence.
But what they cannot understand is that the nature of this substance, it's beyond the jurisdiction of the empiric faculties. I mean, to me, it's actually common sense, to consider that our faculties are very limited. There even within the material sphere, there are animals that can perceive much more than, in terms of like the what they call the electromagnetic spectrum, light waves, sound waves. There is so much going on that we cannot perceive with our human faculties. Other animals, dolphins can hear more, dogs can hear more, there are animals that can see a greater spectrum of light waves than we can, hear a greater spectrum of sound waves than we can. So that I've read one calculation that we can perceive less than something crazy like 0.1% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And then how anybody can have that simpleness of mind, let's say, to persist with this conception that seeing is believing. I mean, the scientists have proved seeing is not believing. What you see does not represent what actually is. The modern scientists themselves are affirming that. We cannot see everything, we cannot hear everything. So it's really ignorant, no disrespect, but it is, if we're just calling a spade, it is ignorant to think that we can only believe what we see before us. It's like with anything in life, there's a particular, and this example has been given by our gurus, you have to measure something, you have to use the right instrument. If you want to measure the speed of the wind, you don't use a thermometer. If you want to measure the temperature of something, you won't use a measuring stick. So you have to use the right instrument, in whatever it is that you're trying to assess. So we're told that in connecting with that higher spirit world, the required instrument is faith, Shraddha. That is because why? Because that is an invitation to the Lord. That's a friend request. That's sending. Krishna doesn't chase after people who are blocking him. He accepts friend requests. That's how he operates. So saying like, even if you just say, I believe in the possibility, that's taking a step in that direction. That's an invitation to the Lord, because he's not interested in imposing himself on anyone. So we have to start that he has plenty of people around him who love him and care for him, who he has a great time with. He doesn't need to prove himself to people who don't like him or are envious of him. He has no need to do that at all. No need and no desire. So he's only interested, just like any healthy person that we know, he's only interested in healthy, loving relationships. He doesn't want to impose himself on anybody. He has no need for that. So we have to take that step towards him. That's inviting him. Oh, they want to have a relationship with me. Then he can come and touch our heart and give some confirmation of his existence. That is how it begins. But even before you go to that idea, just to be able to appreciate with humility how limited our faculties are, that's enough for me. Like Gurudev, he would give the example, if like an insect, if we reach down a tiny insect, if a tiny ant comes in here, crawls on our screen here, that ant has no conception of who I am, who all of you are, what we're talking about, what our lives are about. That little insect doesn't have the conscious capability to be able to comprehend that. We are so, even if that insect is crawling on my hand, this is like the equivalent of a mountain crater to that insect. The insect can have no comprehension. I'm crawling on a human body, and she has a name, and she has a life, and she has likes and dislikes. That insect has no ability to comprehend that. you know, and that insect can only come to know something of us if we decide to give some notice of ourselves. Like Gurudev, the example Gurudev gave, an insect is crawling along, an ant is crawling, has no idea about our higher subjective existence. But if we reach down to touch that ant, you know, then the ant will come to know something of our higher superior existence. You know? And sometimes I joke, you know, how like ants, they may have a whole like debate, you know, like conspiracy discussion about like these so-called humans that supposedly exist, you know. You know, they may argue, they may debate that point endlessly, you know, but the truth is they don't have the ability to comprehend our existence, you know. So why can't we have the humility and honesty to consider ourselves in that way? If there was a being that was so vastly superior, if, first of all, if a God does exist, he must be vastly superior to ourselves. So why should it be so easy for us to comprehend an entity that is so vastly? Why should that supreme superior entity subject himself to appearing beneath our microscope? How would it even be possible? No. So if such an entity exists, he would be so vastly superior to ourselves that it wouldn't really be possible for us to approach him or understand him, you know, on the basis of our own empiric faculties. To me, that is common sense. And I see it as a type of gross arrogance, actually, you know, that we think we are the height of all realization, of all existence. How can anybody have that type of arrogance? I don't know. To me, it doesn't even make logical sense, you know. So to me, it's very logical that we will consider it's very likely that there is a superior conscious being to myself. And then if there is, I will only be able to know of that entity if that entity chooses to make itself known to me. To me, it's a very logical sequence for me, you know. So then the question becomes, how can I attract the notice of that higher entity? You know, is it going to be like we present our academic credentials? Oh, I have a degree from Harvard. I'm in philosophy. You know, I should be able to know this, you know, or I'm an expert in, you know, bioengineering, you know, or whatever it may be. That's going to get his attention, you know, or I built this, I built that, I know this, I know that, I did this, I did that. Is that going to impress? If that entity exists, he's going to be so vastly superior to me. Any ability I have is going to be absolutely meaningless in front of him. You know, it's going to be like a kindergarten student showing off that they know the ABCs, you know, to a university professor, you know, but except it's way more of a divide than that, you know. So is that how I'm going to attract the attention? So what's the key? Mercy, you know, love, affection. That's the key. So that's where the culture of faith comes in. That's what faith is about. You know, that's how we can attract the mercy of that entity. That entity will be moved from their heart. Oh, I see this soul. You know, they want to have a loving connection with me. You know, then I'm attracted to that. You know, I move to reciprocate with that on the basis of mercy. You know, not equality or right or obligation or anything like that, but just mercy, you know, plain and simple. But you see, the problem is that, like, we can discuss this and it all seems very logical, but ultimately it comes down to grace, whether somebody can appreciate these things or not. So then we have to be patient. You know, we have to be patient with persons, you know, when they're ready, you know, they can.
I also see that really, when I meet my children, so I see that how important this presence of to have security.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because this what is obvious to me, I
Mhm.
cannot explain. It is not
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. 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 One needs to have received that divine grace to be able to see what's actually obvious, you know. You know, Krishna likes to give people space, you know, that's another thing, you know. So if people aren't interested in loving him, then he actually facilitates that, you know. So, you know, everyone's on their own journey, you know, everyone has to come in their own time, you know, and it is about love, you know. So there has to be that inner desire. You know, there has to be that inner desire to want this, you know, to be ready for this. So yeah, in the meantime, you know, just being nice to these kinds of persons, you know, that can go a long way. No, we don't need to preach to everyone, but we can be friendly to everyone and give prasadam to everyone and smile at everyone. No, that can go a lot further than we think sometimes, you know. People, those can be the things that people remember, you know, not what you said or how expert your argument was, but how nice you were. How friendly you were, you know, how kind you were, you know. So, and that can begin the process of sukriti also, because if somebody else develops that kind of appreciation for a Vaishnava, then that's beneficial for them, you know, for whatever reason they have appreciation. It may be something silly, but for whatever reason, if they have some kind of appreciation for a Vaishnava, that's good for them, you know, that will help them. So yeah, you can keep it simple.
Didi,
Yes, Prabhu.
also, I've had conversations with Arun Krishna Prabhu in San Jose, who's an actual scientist, rocket scientist, and
we have an actual rocket scientist,
yeah,
and he's on our side.
he's totally on our side. And you know, he shares articles sometimes, and that's actually where the science is going. It's going towards consciousness. So, like that big holodron collider thing, where they're smashing a bunch of particles. That's what the conclusion they're coming to. That is
Really?
Yeah, like the source is consciousness. So you know, that's definitely. I mean, if people are scientifically minded, if they want to get deep into it, that's where the top leading scientists are going, is consciousness.
Dandavats. Can I also follow that? This is Narayani.
Hi, Narayani.
Dandavats. I've been here in Santa Cruz, and even at Cabrillo, you can go take, you know, physics classes, and even some kids that were like working at Starbucks were telling me that science started out to disprove some of the things of, you know, what the Vedas say and all these Asian style cultures and medicines and philosophies and what they are finding. So it's amazing to hear that's what Chinmoy is finding out, because I used to live next to one of those particle accelerators, which if I'm this interested, I should take a tour because they're doing tours again. But pretty much science is finding that all of these philosophies, like everything, like, you know, like for instance, physics is saying that even in the idea of action and reaction karma, that, you know, everything, I get excited and then I can't even think, sorry. But this kid actually was taking a beer bottle, please excuse, but he was like showing me the thing of physics, that everything takes an equal, you know, like to turn the cap, you also have to turn the bottom of the bottle. So I can't describe that right now because I'm very visual, but that just explains that every action has a reaction. So, and then also even Shobhana Krishna Prabhu once told me that actually science is finding that, you know, we didn't just come from an explosion, we're also coming from an implosion, and science can't like speak about or quantify anything that they can't like, you know, quantify. They can't like make a statement unless they can quantify that. So they've still been studying that. And, you know, and Arun Krishna Prabhu is amazing when it comes to me learning anything that would take, you know, Krishna consciousness, which I've always wanted to be proven in a scientific way, because I've had people who are like, oh, okay, so you believe in a mythology or a legend, you know, so I like science backing everything up. And science is completely these days like so many things between sound and sound vibrations, also making all of these patterns, but which makes mandalas and things like that. So I mean, if you go to and things like water and sound vibration, if you go to Cabrillo, you can take a class on things like that. Maybe I will one day. So anyhow, just to back that up with what Chinmoy Prabhu said, there's so many things around us that are proving that they're, you know, we're living on a living, breathing, highly conscious planet. So, and science is still learning about that. Sorry.
Nice. Thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I mean, I like really respect all of that, and you know, we know Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, like he wanted a whole department like focused on that, like proving scientifically, you know, but from another angle, it is kind of humorous, because it's like just imagine the scientists, they decide one day, okay, we've realized, got it, like you know, headline news, stop press, God does exist. It's like, okay. You finally caught up, you know, with what the Vedas were telling us thousands of years ago, you know, like, well done. Like, okay, like, you know, we're all gonna like jump for joy now because you guys have like finally made it to elementary school. You know, like yeah. Anyway, you know, if that can help some like also like another thing people get excited about, just as an example, is like they're discovering evidence of Dwarka, right? Like there are all these documentaries proving the existence of Dwarka. You know, like there you know, there's tons of stuff out on the web about it, and like, you know, they're finding these ancient archaeological ruins, and I hear that someone sent me a link the other day, and it's like, you know, I don't actually need that, you know, like my Gurudev told me the scriptures say it, like that's the end of the story. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed because you can show me, you know, with your microscope, or you can show me you've dated this back to 5,000 years ago. Like, I'm sorry, it doesn't impress me. No. But if that helps some people, you know, I'm very happy, you know. So, you know, my dandavats, you know, to all of that, you know.
There's also scientists that are studying the rocks between India and Sri Lanka and why do they float.
And
Arun Krishna Prabhu was the one who told me when I came back from India, the last time I came back from India, that actually the stories that we're hearing of Sita and Ram are being told by Love and Kush in this cycle of the 4 expansions of our yugas, but they don't remember, or they don't know that the stories that they're telling of Sita and Ram in this, whenever they were telling in this cycle, they don't know that they're telling stories of Sita and Ram, and that those are their parents from all the other yugas before. They're unaware of the fact that, you know, the stories that they're telling that we're now reading right now are from many cycles of Sita and Ram's pastimes. When I heard that just like blew my mind, because I thought like my whole life that we have 4 yugas and we're on the last one. And then after that, I don't know, I just like, then we go back to Goloka or something. you know. And then I'm like, what? This has been happening like forever and ever and ever. That's what it says in the Bhagavad Gita in the beginning. Never was there a you know, time that I didn't exist, or that, you know how it goes. So I'm like, I guess anyhow.
Well, great to hear your reflections, Narayani. We
Oh,
are running out of time.
okay.
I did want to greet Rukmini, because we haven't seen her for a while. How are you, Rukmini?
Dandavad, Devi.
Dhanavads.
We're doing good. Thank you.
I've forgotten our new family member's name. Yeah.
Today,
It's Sue Devi.
yes.
I was thinking that, but because Ananga Krishna's daughter is Sue Devi too, so I was getting mixed up. So it's Sue Devi also. Hi, Sue Devi. Great to have you with us. She's very peaceful. Very peaceful. And we also have Jayadev Prabhu has joined us also, and Chintamani was here earlier, and also Govinda Nandini, Brazil, is also here with us. Bhagavat, Govinda Nandini. Bhagavan Prabhu has also joined us from all the way from Venezuela. Dhanavad. Wonderful to be here with all of you. Suvasini Didi. Hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, we can wrap things up, and unless anyone has any final comments they want to add, we can close. Okay, well, our gratitude, Chinmoy Prabhu. This has been a really nice family group discussion here. Been really nice.
We have a nice family.
We have a nice family. We do. Okay. Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Jai Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Jai Gaur Premanande.
Jai Vishakha Devi Dasi ki Jai.
Jai Gurudev.